Decide immediately. Decide immediately.
A few words about Franz Hörmann. We started, before I had the accident, speaking about the question of ecology and economy valuation. He is professor of bookkeeping at the university in Vienna. He was a critical thinker because he had a problem. He said once that, he will tell it in detail, banks are not so good in their bookkeeping. They were wrong. Then there was a struggle, but then again he became their fantastic, well-known guy who understands the economy valuation. And I tried to add on, to cooperate with him in the ecology valuation. The bookkeeping we did on the globe is wrong when we don't see both sides. We cannot have a valuation on one side, someone has 5 billion income, and on the other side we have maybe 10 billion minus damage in the nature. That's not okay. That is minus 10 billion or minus 5 billion in that case. We have to change. Please, thank you.
So, my dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind introduction first. I will give you a slight overview about what is happening today. We are in the midst of a multi-paradigm shift. And all that we do today and what we discuss and what we talk about, it's very important to consider the framework in which we are moving. Why? Perhaps you see the EcoEco gap, the gap between ecology and economy. And now why is it? I could call it a linguistic phenomenon. You see, I'm a holistic scientist. It has to do with the minds that are shaped by the language we use. This is a phenomenon of our Western culture, and it is very, very deeply rooted in pseudoscience called normative science, which materializes in 3 disciplines: pedagogy, economics, and law. So, if we really want a balance between ecology and economy, and we must use sustainable technology, you will immediately ask, how much can it cost? Can we afford it? Who pays for that? We need investors on the private side, companies who want to earn a profit. It's fair in our current understanding. Or we need the state, but the states are in debt. They're indebted. Where do they get the money? From the taxpayers? Not any longer. So if we want to bridge that gap between economy and ecology, we need a different language. The informatics guys here around know the term domain-specific language, perhaps. You know it. So we must shift our perception, because the change of the perception changes the society. Usually we believe, oh, our society is so bad because people are so greedy. And others in our society are full of fear. But once we understand that greed and fear are not the causal end of this development, but the result of the conceptual structure in which we are indoctrinated and socialized, we can change that. What does that mean? Economy, as we understand it today, is an artifact. It's an artifact of our human mind. And we use, for example, financial statement for value measurement on the corporate, regional, national, and international level. But this is not really a measurement because we use money as a medium of exchange. If I measure something in kilograms or meters, the meter and the kilogram neither do have a length nor a weight. They are just the length and the weight of other things. Not so with our money system. Our money, so they tell us, has an intrinsic value. It has never been the case. Not even in the gold standard, and not even in a gold coin itself. Because without the law of property, the property rights, even your gold coins are worthless. The next robber can take it away. You understand? So either economics and law are one and the same, a social game, so to say, or not at all. As long as we divide society into these two realms of economy, the natural laws of money, and law, the artificial laws of human behavior that can be forced and sanctioned, as long we'll have conflicts in our social groups and societies. Perhaps you know the International Financial Reporting Standards. Those are the financial disclosure rules for publicly listed companies all around the globe. Now, they are fabricated by a small private association in London, paid by the big four CPA firms. They pay those guys to make their rules. And then those rules go to the European Commission, and the European Commission sends the rules to the European Parliament, and the parliaments can't change anything. They must turn it into national law. They don't have any right anymore. Those rules of publicly listed companies are the only most powerful rules on the globe today. But this has nothing to do with democracy, with parliament, with law, and not even with economy, because they are counting wrong things. There are everywhere in their financial statements are circular arguments, and I can prove it over and over again. So it doesn't even make any sense in their own behavioral systems, in their belief systems. They are contradictory from the start on. So those fictional balances with balance states, backward-looking, valuation gaps, aggregation of numbers, window dressing to come around valuation rules only to the balance state, all those are the rules that don't matter anymore. Of course, we have to conform to legal rules still, but only for one reason, very important reason, to keep the communication processes in a respectful way upright. Don't damage a communication process. Because if you damage a communication process, the consequence is violence. Violence by the police, by the states, by the judges, by private armies. We call them police today, but they are private armies from business groups. For many hundred years, the most powerful armies in the globe are private armies from business companies and not from national states. Yeah? That's a myth. And what about ecology? As long as we copy the model of economic reporting in the ecological world, and we build data, financial data statements, ecological statements, published once a year or once a quarter, it's useless. We need real-time data. We need real-time data. We need new interpretation methods. And this is what will bring us forward. So the technology of Wingus is exactly that, what we need today. And when we can construct plausible and provable causal change, then even in their financial statements today, the provisions will turn into legal obligations and the profits will go down in the private companies. And this is, in the old world of the old commercial law, it's a legal argument. As long as they keep those legal rules upright, they have to follow it, because otherwise they break their own rules. They did already break their own rules. They broke the German Grundgesetz with the Finanzmarktstabilitätsgesetz and even the treaties of Lisbon. Yeah, so my argument is the euro isn't a legal tender anymore, because I cannot keep up a fictional money system by breaking the most important legal rules in the continent. Even it is a legal tender by following the law, or it isn't legal money at all. So you have the choice which one to take. You see, all those things only can appear in a world where the society is divided between economic law and legal law. It's a practical joke, but it's not science. So we need real-time data to practice precision farming, scenario planning, and real-time communication. And don't let us live in this illusion that once we have implemented this supply chain of data once and for all, this will be the end of the development. Not at all. In Russia, we have a very forward-looking movement today, the Anastasia movement, where families own 1 hectare of land. They can build with permaculture methods to live together with nature. And we see, with autonomous communities that can produce everything they want out of nature exactly at the place where they are living, we also have peaceful communities, because whom should they steal anything when they can produce everything in concordance with nature? Yeah? This is the ultimate goal, to live again in harmony with nature and with other communities, human communities around us. So economics and law today are in the part of normative science, and I'm not 400% a fan of Wikipedia, but the English-speaking Wikipedia is great, even in the first sentence. Google the term normative science in the English Wikipedia and read what economics and law, the 2 lead sciences of Western culture, really are. Wikipedia tells you. Normative science, economics and law, is a type of information that is developed, presented, or interpreted based on an assumed, usually unstated, preference for a particular policy or class of policies. The short term for that is propaganda. Edward Bernays. Okay. So economics, law, and pedagogy are propaganda, tools to form the individuals in a social context for special purposes. We won't question. Those has historical reasons. Honest historians can cover up it later on. It's not our concern today. Also pedagogy, educational science is part of this. What we can do is developing the art of co-evolution of all living humans and living beings, nature at large, grounded on mutual respect and empathical communication skills. And this is what I will call systemic social science. And systemic social science reunites pedagogy, economics, and law, but with new terms. And the utmost goal is keep communication processes intact. As long as we follow that rule, we keep away violence, non-violent communication. It's very important. Societies are therefore modeled as communication networks, not goods and services, not markets, not money, not legal rules, and things like that. Of course, still we have to follow them on the outside, in a kind of shell. As a programmer, speaking from shells. User interface. But you can keep the algorithm at the background stable and even change the user interface. One user interface for the old legal communities, for the government, for the banks and the old monetary systems. We can switch to alternate currencies, to complementary currencies. However, as long as we still use currencies. Sometime later on, we will only have valuation measurements, electronically voucher systems that dissolve when you pay them. If you construct this thing, deflation and inflation cannot be anymore. Because you have a one-to-one relationship between the voucher and the good or service. And once the customer receives it, the voucher dissolves. Okay? So let's not use on the inside, in our kernel group, the old terms of economics and law. Economics has even a definition that is a joke. The Anglo-Americans call it the optimal use of scarce resources. You know what this means. No economist can explain politicians or the population how to get into a society of abundance, because he leaves his own scientific realm. The boundary of economics is scarcity. Only scarce goods are economic goods. So we have to do away with economics. Otherwise, we will never live in a society of abundance. Yeah? It cannot help us to ask economists what to do, let alone they have different opinions all the time and just start to quarrel. It's the same thing with law. Our Western law goes back to Roman law, but the Roman law was a trick to conquer the other populations without fighting. They had too few soldiers anymore. Yeah? There was the Pax Romana, and so they switched to an intellectual warfare using it Roman law. In Roman law, you have only dead things, and you have debts and obligations. In Roman law, human rights don't exist. So for that. So it is an intellectual weapon, has ever been ever since. Then we had the transformation into canonical law from the Vatican and things like that. And let's stop here because otherwise we are conspiracy theorists. Now let's switch to another conspiracy theory that's not any longer a conspiracy theory, because the Bank of England has committed it, Standard & Poor's, the Deutsche Bundesbank and other authorities, that banks create our money as their own obligations. The Chiral money is nothing more than the debt bill of the bank, and they do it only in their accounting systems. And this procedure they call granting a credit, a loan. They don't give out anything of value. We can prove it in their financial statements and in their bookkeeping. Every day we can prove it. It has already been empirically proved by Mr. Richard Werner, Professor Richard Werner from the University of Southampton. And he has even published it in a peer-reviewed English-speaking journal. So it is a scientific fact that our money doesn't exist and that it is printed out of thin air in the accounting systems of the banks. Now we shall call this debt and repay it even with interest. It's just a joke. It's a practical joke and nothing more. So money is just numbers in the banking computers. They have to be kept scarce because of money's intrinsic value. If we inflate the money's volume, it loses its value. We call it inflation. But you know, if we use vouchers with a one-to-one relation between the customer and the good, and the voucher is dissolved once he receives his good, the problem can't even exist. So it's an artificial problem. All banks can be rescued, even politically, with a so-called debt equity swap. But I leave that to financial ministers' task and to the policy. If they show up the knowledge that they know what the debt of banks really is, the bankers will stop going after taxpayers' money. Yeah? I can promise you that. So as long as we think in the terms of a finite money volume, gold coins, brought into circulation in a small community, we construct a society as a zero-sum game. And a zero-sum game damages the information processes in the society. Why? It's just a plain game theoretical approach. The most well-known zero-sum game on the globe is poker. You all know poker. And now I ask you, with which information strategy will you win in a poker game? You know the rule of poker. The winner takes it all. He gets his own stake and the stake of all other players. So his gain is the loss of all other players. And what are the two best informational rules to win a poker game? First, the poker face. Don't give away any valuable information. And second, even better, the bluff. Defraud them. Okay? So you see, the unethical behavior is not a moral deficit of the player. It is the logical winning strategy of a zero-sum game. On the other hand, we have card games like Wizard. You can Google it, like the magician in English, Wizard, where you just get your cards, and then you must say, how much tricks will you make in this round after looking in your cards? And if you make exactly this number of tricks, you get a bonus additionally. If you make less or too much tricks, you have to pay a penalty. So the motivation is fulfill your contract. You will be only paid if you fulfill your contract. It's just the other way around. But we see we can only give all players a bonus in the game if it is not a zero-sum game. Because in this case, there is no one who can take away its money to pay it to the others. So the only way to construct an honest, fair society with open, very valuable informations flowing through the network is to construct society into a plus-sum game. And this is the strategy that we will keep in the core of our information systems right from the start. And in certain user interfaces, we can say, for that community, you must pay for the information. You are still playing your zero-sum game. But in this context, we're playing already plus-sum games. And you will see how much faster and better we develop. So, this already concludes my short lecture. You will find more information in this website. You can contact me on these emails. It's a little complicated. This is my birth date at the end, because there are so many Franz Hörmanns at Gmail that I thought, now I'm really unique. Thanks for your attention and have a nice day. Bye. Yes, have you any questions? I could have talked a little more about technology because I'm coming from accounting information systems. We have great technology today. Perhaps you know the language Julia from the MIT. Very, very well apt for analytical data processing. And then derivatives of Smalltalk. Faro is an open source product in this realm. Then there's a Swedish group with a revolutionary database called StarCounter. Very, very well apt also for our specific opportunities. And from the viewpoint of knowledge management, I would prefer Prolog. Programming in logics von Alain Kammerauer. There are many, many implementations where we can, the rule basis in the back end, the patterns to follow our national process management for the soils, for example, for the improvement of soils. The knowledge gained in one region can then be transported to the other regions, not in a physical way, because nowadays it stays in the cloud, it stays in the same place. And this is what makes our transformation so revolutionary, because there are no pipelines anymore. As long as I have pipes where some kind of matter flows through, someone can close the pipe and can force payment. You know. But if the information is in the same place, it's only a question who can access it. And these are different rules. It must not solely depend on money to pay to enter this realm. It can be behavioral aspects, membership in different ways. There are a wide variety of rules how we can get new members in our family of this ecological, economical family, I will call it, in the future. Thanks. Yep.
Mr. Hörmann, I know that you are an expert on this. Yesterday there was a meeting at the Forest project in Klagenfurt, and in the current daily newspaper from the Kleine Zeitung, there was the first time written that there was Mr. Fischler and then some people from Alpbach, that the value of the companies should not only be based on the cash flow, it should be based also on the damages which they produce. This was the first time when I heard it from some people like Mr. Fischler, who was the former commissioner for Landwirtschaft, for agriculture. And this is, in my point of view, the first time when I heard this from some other people than you. that the balances and the view on companies, or even I think it should be on the gross national product as well. They just put out figures, and nobody talks about, except Mr. Meyer and you, the damages they produce. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because in this thing, I think this is one of the most important view for the future. It doesn't make sense that Greta drives through the world and takes nonsense, but it's good that she does, but doesn't help.
Now this has to do with political pressure groups in the background of the system. They try to keep up our financial system going. And they win 1 year, a few months, perhaps 2 years. Yeah? And it's the same now with the business model of financial statements. At the end of the 90s, in the last millennium already, even the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants in the USA, where all the CPAs, Certified Public Accountants, are the members, didn't believe anymore in the business model of building up financial statements and then auditing them. Auditing of financial statements was not a viable business goal anymore. They knew that it couldn't work. My former speaker has had some slides from Accenture. It was the consulting division of Arthur Andersen. Arthur Andersen, the auditors, went under. Okay, closed down. Accenture still flourishes. Okay, so you understand. What they are now trying is to turn the business model of financial statements into a financial valuation model for ecological damages. Good idea. Perhaps they win another 3 to 5 years to use financial statements as a business model. Yeah? We accept it because our standpoint is communication. Communication. We understand their goals and we try to communicate with them empathically. If they have goals that are compatible to our goals, and in the context of our environment, obviously this case, we can cooperate in this context and help each other. Yeah? No problem with that. If they want to use their completely idiotic financial statements and they have only one really meaningful goal to improve our environment, we can help them. We can help them and accept it and construct valuation rules, but certainly on a real-time basis and not only once a year or 4 times in the year on a quarterly basis. Yeah? So that we can really turn our ecology and also our societies to the better. Of course, they will have to open up their business model. Much more auditors. Local auditors with another education system, more understanding for ecology and for the technology behind that, all that. But that can we also provide because the knowledge is already, we have already the knowledge for that. We know how to put it into a curriculum for these objects. So thank you.
At first, after the coffee break, I will talk a little bit about this damage question as well, valuation. And between Russia and the Minister Fischler, I visited many years ago Minister Fischler. He was agriculture minister in Austria before, with academician Naumov of Russia. And I told him that the valuation would be important. He negotiated. He said it's not yet of importance. So sometimes the learning process needs some time.
Decide immediately. Decide immediately.